Alright, in this video we're just going to be doing a little bit of review about valence electrons and ionic bonds. I want to make sure we understand those very well and how we can look at the periodic table and use the periodic table to learn a lot about those. And then we're going to learn a little bit of new stuff about covalent bonds and how, by looking at the periodic table, we can learn a little bit about how elements form covalent bonds. So I want to start here with our valence electrons because everything about bonding is because of our valence electrons. So the way we can determine the valence electrons is by looking at our group. So look at the group. And remember, the group is the column that it's in. And that'll tell you the number of valence electrons. So everything in this group, group number 1, is going to have 1 valence electron. Everything in this group, group number 2, 2 valence electrons. And then if you remember, these are all our transition metals. And if we pass through, we'll be at group 13. And it just keeps going from there. 3 valence electrons. This group will have 4 valence electrons, 5 valence electrons, 6, 7, and this group is going to have 8 valence electrons except for helium. So right in the helium box, I'm going to put 2 valence electrons because helium's a little bit different, but that makes it happy. Remember, these are our noble gases. They have a full set. And then 2 makes a full set for helium and makes it happy. So next we're going to be talking a little bit of review over our ionic bonds. And our ionic bonds form between metals and nonmetals. Metals, let's see if I can fit this in here. Metals and nonmetals. So that says nonmetals if you can't read that. And then our metals are always going to be losing valence electrons. Metals lose electrons, where our nonmetals are going to gain those electrons. So you can think our nonmetals are kind of stealing those electrons from the metals. Nonmetals gain electrons. And then the important thing is we need to know the charge from that. So our metals are always going to have, I'll put this in parentheses, a positive charge. And our nonmetals are going to have a negative charge. So metals, positive charge, nonmetals, negative charge. So in this group right here, they have 1 valence electron. They want to lose that valence electron. That gives everything there a +1 charge. Group 2, they have 2 valence electrons. Remember, these are our metals. They will want to lose those 2 valence electrons. So all our metals in this group +2. If we have 3 valence electrons, and boron's a metalloid, so it follows different rules sometimes, but all the elements below it, aluminum below, 3 valence electrons, they want to lose all 3. So the charge would be +3 for those. For these, if it's not a metal, these ones right here in this class, they don't really want to form ionic bonds too much. So carbon, not a fan of becoming an ion. Silicon also not a big fan of becoming an ion. And that takes us to our nonmetals over here. So our nonmetals want to gain those electrons. So remember, this is nitrogen. It has 5 valence electrons. And to get 8, it needs to gain 3. So this would be a -3 charge when it becomes an ion. And here we got 6 valence electrons. They want to gain 2, so it'll be a -2 charge when it becomes an ion. And if they have 7 valence electrons, they become an ion, -1 charge. Which brings us to our noble gases. They are already happy. They got all the valence electrons they need. They don't form ions either. So you'll never going to see a noble gas in an ionic bond. So lastly, we're going to be talking now about our covalent bond. This will be a little bit of new stuff. Our covalent bonds form between 2 nonmetals. Two nonmetals. And they make bonds to fill their octet. They make bonds to have as many electrons as that noble gas right next to them. So we're going to say make bonds to fill octet. And remember, hydrogen, to fill its energy level or to look like it's noble gas, only has to have 2 valence electrons. So that makes it a little bit different. So if we take a look at this column, our only nonmetal here is hydrogen. So I'm just going to write hydrogen here because it's a little special. It's on the left side of the periodic table. It's our one nonmetal on the left side. And it has 1 valence electron. It wants 2. And remember, it makes as many bonds as it wants to fill that octet. So if it wants 1 electron, our hydrogen, we will find, will always form only 1 bond. So hydrogen forms 1 bond. We got everything in group 2 is metals, so they will never form any covalent bonds. Group 3, borons and metalloid, so it may sometimes, but not in this class. We're just going to be looking at nonmetals. So no nonmetals in this group. And if we move over, we have carbon in this next group, group 14. It has 4 valence electrons and wants 8. So that means it needs to make 4 bonds. That could be 2 double bonds, it could be a triple bond and a single bond, or it could be 4 single bonds. But any way you put those bonds together, it needs to make 4 bonds, so it could share its 4 electrons, and other elements could be sharing 4 electrons with it, so it can get up to 8. So carbon will always want to make 4 bonds. In the next group over, they have 5 electrons, and they want to have 8 valence electrons. To do that, they will be making 3 bonds. So if you already watched the video of nitrogen bonding with a nitrogen, they form a triple bond because each nitrogen wants to form 3 bonds. And in the next group over, they got 6 valence electrons, 1 8. In order to do that, they can form 2 covalent bonds. And you may remember that 2 oxygen atoms bonding together with a double bond. Or a long time ago, I think I showed an example of oxygen bonding with 2 hydrogen to make H2O or water. That would be 2 bonds forming with that oxygen. And then fluorine, it just wants 1 more electron. And chlorine as well, anything in that column wants 1 more electron. So that means they only have to share 1 of theirs. So they're just going to form 1 bond. And just like with our ionic bonds, you could take a look at our noble gases. They already have a full set. They do not want to do any kind of bonding. So please write this down on a page in your notebook. It is basically a great review, like a really shorthand review of ionic bonds and covalent bonds that you can use to help you to figure out different elements want to make by looking at your periodic table.